But we're waking up to the fact that, I mean, we all are, all generations, that hey, that was probably not the best way to be socialized. And this is like a problem with men. So this is not for women to solve. Like, that's not right. We have to be there for each other to solve this problem, because most of the world's problems are from men.
Hey, welcome back to the Rise Up Together podcast. We're here at episode 15. We are with Tim and Max, the usual hosts, just three of us today. And we're going to be talking a bit about men's mental health. It's been kind of hidden from the mainstream media for a while, and not something that's discussed too often or enough, really. But yeah, we're just gonna get right into it. And you know, with that being said, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, men died by suicide nearly four times more often than women in the U.S. in recent years. So, Tim, Max, why do you guys think these rates are higher for men, and how do we kind of begin to address this crisis? And by the way, trigger warning, we're going to be going right into it, right into the core. So anyone that, is not cool with that might not be the episode for you, but we're kind of going to go straight to the core.
Um, I guess I'll start off. I think like we're not as men, we're taught like to not really to like kind of lack emotional intelligence and like just emotional understanding in general because like the general like framework is push through or take it out on people in like sports or aggression or whatever you may do. So oftentimes this will lead to, since we're like already like aggressive, will lead to suicide behaviors because it's like shown as weakness if you ever ask for help or do something like that. So eventually you'll just break and there'll be nothing you'll have nothing left because you'll just be so far down the wrong path and you're just done. And the men, yeah, so I don't know why that happens specifically though to men. More so probably because talking about emotions in general is like a bad thing and that leads to like more extreme outcomes, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. As we talk about this, a part of me wants to make jokes because it's just too serious for us dudes. We're just used to kind of talking crap to each other and just, doing stuff together. But to sit on Zoom and talk about men's mental health for all three of us, I bet is very uncomfortable. And that's why we need to have these conversations, because like we all have mental health, we all have emotional well-being, and us men tend to lack a lot of the, like you said, Max, emotional and social skills that are key to nurturing relationships, really deepening those, which is really fundamental to any person's well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's across the board. Everyone has a different situation, different environment they're first being raised in, and then kind of going about their daily lives in. So there's a whole lot of factors. I know, you know, anyone in the military has a higher likelihood, unfortunately, of taking their lives, and I know of families who've been affected by this, specifically with, dads in the military. So yeah, I think a lot of it is that, men are expected to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and kind of go about business as usual, you know, suck it up, buttercup, which I do think there is a place for a certain level of stoicism, and which is not suppressing the emotion. How it's more so observing it, acknowledging that it's there, experiencing it, and then choosing to respond in a positive way. But I think where the issue lies is that, there's this, historically at least, there's been a theme of you should suppress this, you should not show this, or, you know, let it be known that you're struggling or battling something, because that will show that you're weak, that will show that you're incompetent as a man, right? That you're not, that you are failing as a man. And I think that's a fear that every boy, young man, or man fears. Um, yeah, but I think it stems there. It starts with the stigma of the historical um, ethos behind what it means to be a man, what it means to go about the world as a man. So yeah, I think things need to change culturally, and there needs to be more awareness, less stigma, more opportunities to reach out, because a lot of myself included, there have been plenty of times where, I could have benefited from talking through some things. I have, sought counseling before, but there are times where I'm just gonna not talk about this, when it would have been the best thing to just, chat with a counselor, a trusted friend, or whatever. But yeah, I think it starts there, with the stigma, and creating a more acceptable standard where men can speak out, can, and obviously there's a place and a time, and a certain, you don't want to, you should be careful about, who you kind of confide in, because not everyone is, unfortunately, not everyone has your best interest in mind. That's just the reality of of life in the world. But I think every man should have opportunities, um, to have someone they can confide in, and talk to about things, that will keep things confidential, that will be, respectful, that won't stab them in the back for being vulnerable, and opening up about things. So yeah, not to hog the conversation, but I think it starts there.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you mentioned, and I think about like it's one thing for us to like talk about it here and to like be open, but I don't know about you guys, but like if you're ever in kind of that dark place or darker place yourself, how often, I mean, I still say silent a lot of the time and kind of suppress it all. So I don't know how like you all have been changing with that. And I think about just like there's something I was thinking about. I forget exactly what it was now. Maybe I'll come back to it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the patriarchy or whatever system you want to call it, it tends to reward toxic men, and that the nice guys tend to be like left behind or something. So it's important to have compassion for men's troubles because they're intimately related to women's problems too. In fact, it's just all about feminism and gender equality. And we don't have a rite of passage like women do when they have their first period. Us men, we used to just, walk through coals or on our feet or something, or do something that was really heroic. But these days, it's like, when are we a man? What does that mean exactly? It's so confusing with all the different messages. But just essentially that stoicism that's required these days is emotionally is saying, hey, I'm struggling and I need help. And that is the hero's journey. And it's just so admirable when, especially men, admit, like, hey, I'm struggling. I need a brother. I need some help. Because to just stuff it down and be silent is the problem, right?
Yeah. Um, and that's something I made me think about something. Yesterday I like went to this event and got like this mental health award thing, and surprisingly there were actually a lot of athletes who were there. at the event, and like athletes are like the manliest of the manlies, right? Like they're like the cream of the crop guys. And there was one guy who I was talking to was at MLB. He was an MLB pitcher, and I was just like talking to him as like a human being, right? Not like as like a as like because his experiences are literally just like same as everyone else. And I was talking about his mental health when pitching in the games and everything. And he was like telling me about how intense it was because like he's everything, right? Because like if he screws up, he like harms the team. And then we talked about fans as well, just not really they people will turn your back on you so quickly as fans and stuff. So it's just so mentally exhausting and with the media and everything. And then there was also like a basketball player there too. So it's this is really a topic that applies to everyone, and it's funny how like a lot of athletes often are in this case because a lot of them are like the best at um like suppressing their emotions and kind of just focusing on win goal. I was watching a podcast with I think it was on a Lewis Howes podcast with a soccer player who's really famous. I forget his name, and he was talking all about it. Like he was like just not even content, happy, like kind of just it all stemmed from like this childhood trauma of not being good enough and trying to please his father. And that led to him being really successful on like the soccer field, but not necessarily in friendships or all the other aspects of life that are beyond just your success from a wealth perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, and we can't avoid stress, and there is, a healthy amount of stress that will push us to grow, to achieve, you know, great things and whatnot. So, I think there's part of it is, there's a certain threshold where, it just is what it is. That's part of life. It's part of being alive and part of being human. And however, when things get overwhelming or, we feel like we're just bogged down, that's when, I think this whole idea of a men's group or, men's small group, is so essential to have because if you, I think I was hearing John, who we had earlier on the podcast talk about this, or it might have been someone else as well. But if you start talking to your girlfriend or the wife or you know, someone you're romantically involved in, it's not typically going to end well because that's just they might tolerate it for a bit, but it's going to kind of backlash because the male female dynamic that it's just it doesn't work out typically when you're constantly confiding in your female partner. So it's important to have a group of other men you can kind of confide in and talk about these things with that are that can understand themselves and can be empathetic because they probably walked in your shoes as well, right? So I think it's so essential to have some kind of brotherhood, right? Someone you're kind of going to war with, going to battle with, whether that's, a coworker you trust or, a good friend. But I think a big part of the issues is that the whole idea of, you know, brotherhood and camaraderie has kind of died. We don't see that as much in the digital age. A lot of us are isolated, are kind of, you know, obvious, there's always community out there and opportunities, but um yeah, I think that's a big issue as well is that that whole idea of camaraderie is not reinforced enough.
Yeah, it's definitely the stigma. And, we used to live in the villages and we had, I guess, a tribe of elders. And I think that's what we're lacking these days is a tribe of like older men and all types of men that are just there supporting one another and just more of an open heart, more of an open mind, just no shame or judgment. Just, hey. let's go make this the best lives for ourselves possible and hold each other accountable because we're men. And that's what men do is, we're conquerors in terms of like obstacles and challenges. We figure it out and we want to fix things all the time. But some of these emotional things are a little more complicated. And we weren't socialized in the way to think like that. So I think it could be particularly challenging for men depending on what they're going through. Um, and we need each other just like women need other women as well. So it's good to see the trend of people talking about the subject.
For
Yeah.
sure. Um, really important. And then I think about, so we look at like a report from the National Institute of Mental Health. It shows that like 1 in 10 men experience depression or anxiety, but like many don't seek the help. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But what do you guys think are like the barriers or internal, external factors that prevent men from kind of asking for support if we were to go into this topic a bit further?
Yeah, I think the a big barrier is just it's not talked about enough. It's very much still in the shadows. I think there have been some, campaigns here and there. There's, Men's Mental Health Month, but I think it's still very much in the shadows, and I've, it's, I even see people mocking it as well, in comments of posts and whatnot. It's I don't think, I think that's not everyone, obviously, but I think yeah, it's a topic that's still very much in the shadows, even though there has been, some effort to kind of put it out there more.
Yeah, I think it's been passed down for generations that, men just don't ask for help. And, it's like this temptation to just pass it down to the next generation still. But, we're waking up to the fact that, I mean, we all are, all generations, that, hey, that was probably not the best way to be socialized. And this is like a problem with men. So this is not for women to solve. Like that's not right. We have to be there for each other to solve this problem, because most of the world's problems are from men. And it's easy to just fear a man because we're kind of bigger and a little intimidating at times. And that's also a barrier to asking for help is you don't want to be seen a certain way. You want to put on this polished, strong front all the time or laugh it off because you're so cool. And it's just too heavy to talk about, right? So, but eventually, there's going to be challenges in life and we're going to be called as men to rise to the challenge.
Yeah, that's a interesting point as well when you talk about like generations. Like generational trauma is something that I feel like not too many people really think about, but it's like it really is like a real thing. Looking at like cycles of wealth as well, like just like how things go about. So it really takes like, and at the same time, that can be a good thing too if it takes like one person to really, they can really change the cycle, but they need some sort of resource or some sort of guidance, right? Because it's like you can't really, if you can't really expect some like it's not even the man's fault, right? Like it's like if they're doing that thing, like we can't, there's no reason to be like angry, I feel like, towards people who are behaving in these ways. Like it's sometimes it's not even like that's kind of where my sense of morality has changed in a bit lately, where it's like people committing like crimes and all sorts of things. Like, is it even my place to be like angry towards them rather than like it's all just like kind of like an educational kind of thing. Everything ties back to just like what we're learning about. And this is why like there's so many different ways we can tackle this issue. But we don't really think like too creatively about it because it's a hassle and people don't want to like go through the process and the effort to really make the change. But like if we just look at like education from a young age could be something that's so important towards this type of behavior if you're able to like tackle their brain chemistry and everything and teach certain skills that people need. in like kindergarten, first grade, like all that stuff, right? That could what like how could that impact the world? So I don't know if there's like a lot of like longitudinal research and stuff on this type of topic, but I feel like that's really important if we're thinking about it from like more of like beyond just this timeline, but like a global kind of case, yeah, just like for the world in general.
Yeah, I definitely think that there would be a lot of benefit of going back to the school system and, really, I think it should be a whole subject of, kind of how you go about the world, how you get through difficult things, difficult times. How are you kind of harnessing anger, sadness, um, all the kind of negative emotions? How do you kind of harness those and respond rather than react and try to numb it with something, whether it's, alcohol or drugs or whatever that may be, but learning how to more, education and awareness around the fact that, hey, you know, it's part of being human, obviously, and you can channel those difficult emotions into something positive. You can, you know, instead of reaching for you know, for drugs, alcohol, whatever, vice, you know, um, or just workaholism, rather, channeling that into something positive, like helping somebody else, help, I think it's really about, you hear that whole saying of, you fight for the brother next to you or the person next to you, and that becomes where you get your meaning from, in times of war or in times of battle. And I think there's a lot of value in that and teaching that, hey, the more you get your eyes off of yourself and kind of the me, myself, and I, yes, we need to take care of ourselves, obviously, and we need to love ourselves. That being said, there comes a time and a place where we need to get our eyes off of ourselves. We need to focus on helping the person in front of us, and that is a huge part of getting through those, types of moments and periods of life. But yeah, I definitely think there would be a lot of benefit from kind of reinforcing this into the educational system, some kind of curriculum early on to, you know, help kids deal with this as they mature, and especially young men. I think there would be a lot of value in that.
Also, I'm sorry.
Uh, Go ahead, Max.
I was going to talk about as well, like I actually watched this video recently, and I grew up like atheist and all that sort of thing, but just like the relationship of the church and mental health among men is surprisingly like there's something big there that I didn't really realize, and it makes sense if you think about it, I guess, like because a big issue is like loneliness amongst men is like the highest it's ever been, right? It's really up there, and people like don't have really that sense of purpose or meaning, and the church like provides that for people, and also it's great for like finding like relationships and different things, bringing people together, and it's something that like I didn't really even think about that crossed my mind, but it was there was surprisingly like a lot of like interesting data in regards to like how that could help people. So it's not something that I'm entirely like sold on, but it's something definitely to consider and think about for like institutions that can help people out and bring community to everyone and provide like that sense of brotherhood that religion sometimes can often give you if you have like great leaders and all sorts of things. So that's just something I wanted to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Max. There's an article. It says daily chats in nature boost mental health, and that daily chats were linked to significantly higher mental well-being scores. So that's good that we're all meeting right now to chat as friends. Nature and mental stimulation help, so time outdoors. And also not only that, but physical activity, obviously, which is a good one, practicing spirituality and helping others. We're also linked to improve mental well-being. So, for me, strengthening my spiritual health has been so important, and I can't emphasize that enough. And I was also thinking of the fact that us men are not really asked anymore for our help as much as we used to, so it's easy to fall into this trap, this thinking pattern that you're, useless, so to speak. And unfortunately, you can confirm that, if you have a core belief like that, that's a filter you view the world and how you show up in it. So yeah, I just contemplated that too. But absolutely, Max. I mean, spirituality, I think, is so important for community and connection as well. It's just a good thing to get out of the house, to be in a quiet place with God or whatever religion one practices. So yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to tap into is, you know, especially with the Instagramification of today's culture, the kind of the hyper competitiveness that exists as well, at least, in the digital world, more than ever with Instagram lives and, just kind of all the glamour that you see. It's, obviously that adds to the problem. And, I think um, part of what could deter men from reaching out to one another is this kind of hyper competitive environment that we find ourselves in, where everyone's, you know, trying to show off the grill and what they've produced and what they've the it's you know materialism is nothing new, but I think the hippies were after something with their um how they deserted the whole materialism thing. And um really it's all about experiences, not the materials. That experiences and relationships and who we experience life with, that's most meaningful at the end of the day, rather than all these material possessions that are all going to burn up and rust. And nothing wrong with them, but I think there's a lot of a lot of issues that stem from this hyper materialism and hyper competitiveness of kind of showing off and showing that you're kind of living the dream and living the glamour lifestyle. So yeah, I would say that definitely adds to it. But yeah, I think to your point, Tim, men want to feel needed, like they matter, the value that they're providing value in the world, that what they're creating with their hands, or that their work is making a difference. I kind of being able to take pride in one's work and knowing that it does matter, that hey, you're needed, that what you're doing is important, whether you're a garbage man or a CEO of a Fortune 50 company. The work of your hands matter. And yeah, I think men don't really rarely get the appreciation that they're looking for, and the respect that they're looking for and desire, because that I think that's at a core of our need as men, to feel like we're valued, like we're respected, like what we're doing is, it matters, and is making a difference. um, yeah, so I think that needs to be addressed on a wide scale as well. And just kind of going back to the generational trauma, whether whatever baggage you're carrying, that's a whole nother story to tell, that adds adds to the complication of things. But yeah, I would say just more awareness in general, and awareness of, hey, what a man needs um, to live a healthy life. Honestly, yeah.
You make me what you were talking about also made me think about like people use the term toxic masculinity, and that's a thing, but also another thing with men is like I'd argue in times we're not masculine enough too. And that's not like a bad thing. Like masculinity itself is not is like can be a really good great thing, I feel like. Um and just the way it's like people often portray it is really poor. Like like strength, leadership, right? Like those qualities that are associated with like the idea of masculine men are like great traits. But it's sad like how kind of things have like been taken advantage of. I'm trying to put the words out there. I don't know if you guys understand kind of where I'm trying to get at here. But like there's um I struggle with like understanding the relationship with masculinity when it comes to mental health because I think a lot of men want to be like masculine in a way, and a lot like aren't as much as they would like because of toxic masculinity, which is a thing, like mansplaining, all that stuff. But there's like needs to be a way in which we can understand this emotional component while also keeping like those masculine traits that are very, very useful that we like you can use, right, that are needed. So what do you like, how do you guys think about that at all? If that's something you agree with, disagree with, curious.
Yeah, I think in this topic that there's two truths that are real and evident is that, men's problems and women's problems are both valid, and that we as people just want to feel you needed and valued and contributing to society and loved by people is just fundamental human needs. And there's a lot of political, lization of words that just seem to want to divide us. And it's, it's important to have a compassionate outlook on the subject and consider other perspectives. And in your heart, what's true, what you've experienced as a man and what you've seen in the world. And as long as we're speaking love and life into it, I think that's the best way to go about having these conversations.
Yeah, I think a big part of it of feeling, obviously there's a physical, a mental, and a spiritual component to it, but I think having a purpose, a clear purpose of kind of having a hill to die on, so to speak, and brothers to kind of go to battle with. I think that um, plays a lot into it of just having a clear meaning, a purpose, mission, for your life, and kind of how you're trying to better the world. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all here to, I believe that, we're here to make the world a better place in some capacity, right? It's not all about just, yes, we have our own goals for our own growth and whatnot, but I think at the end of the day, um, we were all kind of brought into this world to make it a better place in some capacity, whatever that looks like, whatever kind of vertical we're operating in. Um, so yeah, I would say just having really a clear mission, and being kind of discipled in that mission, and having mentors, and um, like Tim said, kind of older men who have been through the ringer, have been through the rodeo, and can counsel, can provide guidance, kind of wise counsel. But we're coming up on the end here, guys. We're gonna do part two in the next episode, so stay tuned for that. Max, Tim, any final words?
Thanks, guys. Good conversation.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned for episode 16. We will be back here for part two. Comment, leave a like below. Feel free to share this out to anyone you think could benefit, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.